Thank you all for tuning in once again to Queen Ahmadiyyah TV presents True Crime. Okay, so let's get ready to get into it, people. Now, this evening I'm going to be talking about a rich gentleman who's a millionaire, lived in Atlanta. He was sort of a player. He had all these women, as most men with money do, right? So anyway, he got caught up with this crazy woman who clearly was real life fatal attraction. Okay? So let's get into it, people. Let's get into it. Let me see who I have in the chat. Now, I would also like to ask you all to go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Be sure to click the notification bell, click the word all so that you're notified each time I go live. If you have not been receiving your notifications, always double check and make sure that you're still subscribed to the channel because you know how it is in the YouTube streets. Don't forget to like and share this video. You can go ahead and feel free to do that now. And don't forget to follow the Queen on Instagram at QueenAShakur, also on Instagram at divine_goddess_27, and on Twitter at dgoddess27, Brighton and Patreon at QueenAShakur. Silent D says, listening while working. Okay, thank you, Silent D, for tuning black in, honey. Okay, hello, Ryan, Marietta, hashtag unbothered, Craig. All right, Fight for Black, Cutie Tootie, Brittany, Alvin. All right. So I want to thank you all for being here on this lovely Saturday evening. You could be anywhere, but you chose to be here with the Queen. Okay, so let's get into it, people. And don't forget, I'm giving you a double dose of true crime. And then I'm going to give you a double dose of paranormal on my Beyond the Realm channel. So make sure you buckle your seatbelts and get your snacks out. All right? Okay, so let's talk about it. Now, how did Lance Herndon die? First of all, that's the question we should be discussing first and foremost. Now, he was 41 years old, and he was a self-made millionaire living a good life in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the founder and the CEO of Access Incorporated, which was a computer consulting firm. And he was prominent. He lived in a prominent part of the city with young, wealthy, and influential people. Now, moreover, he was one of the most eligible bachelors also. It wasn't strange for him to be seen out at different nightclubs, you know, parties that well-to-do people were having and just out having a good time and living his best life, okay? So that all being said, Lance always, you know, took his work, made his work like his top priority. Work was always first with him. And that's likely why he wasn't married, you know, out here just living a bachelor life, because he put a lot of his time and effort and focus into his career. So anyway, one day he failed to show up for his work. He wasn't at his office, and everybody started wondering where he was because it wasn't like him to just take off, you know, and especially to not even let anyone know that he wasn't going to be there, you know, like a day or so in advance. So when he didn't show up, people started wondering what was going on. And then his employees, his friends, his family, they all started to worry, especially when no one even heard from him. So when this news reached Lance's mother on August the 8th of 1996, now she got dressed and went over to his house in Roswell to check on him. So once she got there, on the waterbed of his master bedroom, she found him dead. He had been beaten and bludgeoned to death, and his naked body lay there, covered in blood, except for a sheet that was partially covering him. Now, per the reports, Lance had received a non-fatal blow to the back of his head with a large crescent wrench before he took several more to the front of his head and the side of his face, also the front of his face as well. Now, the latter of the blows crushed all the bones, crushed not all of them, but crushed his bones and caused his death. The scene made it clear that Lance's slaying was either an act of jealous rage, someone who was clearly vicious in their attack, or a seedier sex crime. So with a myriad of ex-wives and lovers and admirers and, you know, all these other people who were also competing against him in business, and he had critics. Well, with all of this going on, there was a lot of suspects, you know, that the police had to sift through because he'd been married multiple times, had all these women, because remember, he was a bachelor. So yes, he was a player, wealthy, nice looking black man, all these women chasing him, and many of these women he was in relationships with. So And then let's not forget, because of his success, he had many people competing against him in business. So anyway, some of the things that they took notice of was the fact that there were no witnesses and there was no fingerprints left at the crime scene. Now that made it much more difficult for them to try to figure out who could have done this. Now, a few telling things were that Lance's body was found in the position in which he usually slept. And even though his wallet and credit cards were left untouched, the clothes that he'd worn the previous night before were actually missing. Now, all of this suggested that the assailant knew his patterns and was attached to him. So likely that's why they took the clothes, to maybe have something to remember him by. Who knows? Or maybe they were trying to hide something. Now, quickly, investigators zeroed in on 27-year-old Dion Bow. She had met Lance in April of 1996, and despite having a husband and family of her own, well, she began an affair with the millionaire. Now, some reports do suggest that she had been separated from her husband at the time. Upon digging deeper, they found that Lance was thinking of breaking things off with Dion. Now, one of the contributing factors that he had was that he had to call the cops on her. Okay, he had to call the cops on her a month prior to his passing. And on July the 10th, she had allegedly made a scene outside of his home by continuously banging on the door after repeatedly, or reportedly rather, seeing him with another woman. Now, she had to be escorted away by the cops. So clearly she was doing the most. And you know, when you have situations like this, often these men who are philanderers or have extra, different women that they deal with, the thing in Lance's case, these women, they likely knew that he had other women. They knew they weren't the only one. And Dion should have surely known she wasn't the only one, because clearly she was still married. Now, she may have been separated, but nevertheless, she was still legally married. So I don't know why she would have thought or should have thought that he would be investing all of his time and efforts into her. And then the nerve of her to get mad and start a scene when she had a whole husband somewhere. But you're mad at him because he's out with somebody else. Please make it make sense. But you know what they say. There's a thin line between love and hate, right? So anyway, because Dion's statements were consistent throughout her interrogations and they had no hard proof against her, the authorities found no cause to arrest her. But that soon changed in January of 1998. After all, it was then that Dion's mother-in-law came forward to reveal that she had spoken to Dion a few weeks after the murder, where the latter had apparently admitted to being at Lance's home the night that he was killed. Now, Dion had told officers otherwise. I mean, she had told them a whole nother story, honey, but she told her mother-in-law that she was actually at his house the night he was killed. And that was the reason that she was arrested and charged with several counts in connection to Lance's murder. Now, when Dion first went to trial, the most incriminating proof against her was the DNA that was actually found underneath Lance's fingernails. Clearly, he was trying to defend himself against her attacks. She likely caught him off guard. Now, there was DNA of hers underneath his fingernails, containing trace evidence of both her and his. A forensic expert also testified that 2 head hairs and 1 pubic hair recovered from Lance's nude body also seemed to match the samples obtained from Dion. Now, with that, a jury found her guilty of malice murder, theft by taking, and financial transaction card fraud, sentencing her to life in prison. But however, Dion successfully appealed her case. So she won her appeal. She headed back to court in 2003. But after 4 days of deliberations, a judge declared a mistrial as the jury was hopelessly deadlocked. Now, then, to avoid another long-lasting public court appearance, Dion pleaded guilty to the reduced charge of manslaughter. Clearly, it was likely premeditated, but she, went ahead and agreed to the manslaughter, took that plea, so she didn't have to get all that time and didn't have to go back for another trial. She agreed to serve 10 years in prison with an additional 10 years on probation. After serving time in a state correctional facility, she was released in 2011. If you ask me, she should never have gotten out. Now, while some reports suggest that Dion Andrea Bow has stayed in Georgia since her release, others claim that she has since moved to reside in Florida and Kansas for brief periods. But one thing is certain: the Jamaican immigrant keeps a low profile these days and doesn't want to seem or doesn't want any media attention on her anymore. As for her marriage, when Dion was arrested in 1998, she was in the middle of the divorce process, so it was safe to assume that the relationship was no longer going well and that it was actually over. Now, but hold on, there's more. Let me see some of the comments. Goodness Ready Bow said she was Jamaican. Yes, absolutely. Pearl says, sorry, I'm late, Queen. Oh, honey, that's okay. She was a beautiful woman, says Goodness Ready Bow. Most crazy women usually are. Please pay attention. Okay. So she went over there and had relations with him and killed him. Oh, yes, that is cold-blooded. You know who that reminds me of? Jodi Arias. Remember, she killed her boyfriend Travis after he broke it up with her, and then she went over there and lured him into sex, and then afterwards slaughtered him. And if you ask me, now either she's a full-blown psychopath, Jodi Arias, or she was possessed by a demon. Because I'm still trying to figure out how she did all that damage and then had the nerve or the strength to drag Travis's body, and he wasn't small, and she was a small frame woman. How does she drag him or move his body by herself? That's the question that I always had. And the heinousness of which she murdered him in, yeah, it seemed like definitely there were some demons involved. That's just my opinion. Very crazy, people. Very crazy, okay? So anyway, now let's talk about Dion just a bit more. Let's talk about her just a bit more. And everyone, please get the likes up. Please like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. She hit him in the head with a big wrench. Clearly crazy. You know, when you get involved with someone, sometimes there are signs that the person is crazy or very, vindictive or violent. Now, when she was out there knocking on his door like that and making a scene and getting all upset because she saw him with somebody else and knowing that they weren't in a monogamous relationship, he should have gone, in my opinion, and gotten a restraining order against her. But at the end of the day, that probably wouldn't have helped much, because even though people get restraining orders and orders of protection, these people that are crazy enough to kill them, they actually end up doing it anyway. Actually, what they end up doing anyway. So now, let's talk about the relationship. Or no, let's talk about the crime scene. Now, like I said, he was found dead by his mother, Jackie. She came over and saw his partially nude body covered in blood as he lay in his waterbed. He'd been killed with a blunt instrument. He was discovered lying on his back. And that's why they say he was found dead in the same position that he slept in. I think that what happened is, this is just my theory, I think she went over there and she already knew she was going to kill him. I'm pretty sure that she went over there. She was angered because she knew he was messing around with all these women. He wouldn't be exclusive with her. And I think she went over there and had sex with him and waited for him to fall asleep. And then she attacked him, because very likely if he had been wide awake and on his, alerts, she probably wouldn't have been able to overcome him. But yeah, I think she went over there, purposely had sex with him, maybe had a drink or two, waited till he was completely asleep, and got up and started attacking him, catching him completely off guard. Now, his body was found in the master bedroom suite, and his head had been crushed by repeated blows with a blunt instrument, although the murder weapon itself was never recovered. The medical examiner later concluded that it was likely a large crescent wrench. There were no defensive wounds on the body, indicating that the victim was ambushed. So there you have it. She clearly ambushed him. Because, when there's defensive wounds, and in fact, I saw a woman in the store the other day in Kroger. I'm very observant. I just happened to notice things or whatever. And I noticed she had these scars on her forearms, on both forearms, clearly defensive wounds. Because the first impulse when someone is striking you in the upper body area, or, even in the midsection, torso, you throw up your arms to try to block it. That's just a common instinct, right? And a lot of times people get cut like that or whatever, and they have those defensive wounds. So that's how the coroners can tell that they put up a fight. And if you don't have those wounds, you don't see those wounds on the body, then you know that 9 times out of 10, the person was caught completely off guard. They didn't have a chance to defend themselves. So anyway, he was found lying on his back in a position that he normally slept in. And so His wallet and several credit cards were found untouched on the dresser in the bedroom, although his shirt and pants were gone. A bloody pillowcase, perhaps used by the perpetrator to wipe off blood after the attack, was discovered stuffed in the toilet in the master bedroom. Now, perhaps the most unusual thing about Lance Herndon's bedroom was the fact that all of his alarm clocks had been unplugged. Herndon was habitually rose as early as 4 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. every morning. He would set his alarm clocks at 3. In addition, the phone that beside the victim's bed was also unplugged. So this is how you know she premeditated this. So she unplugged the phone so that if it rang, he wouldn't be woken up by someone calling him in the middle of the night. Also, more likely than not, she turned off those alarm clocks because she planned on killing him when he was in a deep sleep. Now, for those of you who know anything about sleep patterns and REM, which is rapid eye movement, then you would likely know that when a person goes to bed at normal bed hours, and I'm not talking about people who stay up all night, but people who are used to getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, well, they would surely go to bed early, right? So with that all being said, the time that you're in your deepest sleep and the very hardest to wake up is during the hours of 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. And that's because during that time of sleep period, when you go to bed at a regular hour, that is, you experience something called REM, which is rapid eye movement. And that is usually when you're in a dream state in a very deep sleep. So she likely knew this, and she knew his alarm clocks would go off at 3 a.m. And that's when he would be in REM, and she wanted to make sure he didn't wake up. So that's likely why she did that. Lee Harp says murder, she wrote. Wow, what was she thinking? Murder is what she had on her mind, clearly. Now, so because the heater in Herndon's waterbed kept his body temperature from falling below 87 degrees, his exact time of death could not be determined. The medical examiner who performed his autopsy, however, estimated that Lance Herndon had been dead about 6 to 8 hours by the time his body was discovered shortly after 10 a.m. Now, they could likely make that estimation by the fact that I'm sure within those amount of hours, he had rigor mortis had set in. Okay, that's how you can pretty much tell how long a person's been dead. You may not know the exact time of death, but you can pretty much estimate it if rigor mortis has set in, and also by blood that has coagulated. Okay, so in the early in their investigation, police began to suspect Bow of the murder, but the case against her was too weak to warrant an arrest. Nevertheless, police kept an eye on her over the next year. Authorities first went to question her hours after Herndon's body was discovered, but no one answered their repeated knocks on the door. After speaking to a neighbor, they left. But the neighbor later told them that Dion Bow had come to their house immediately after the police left to find out what they had wanted. Now, you sitting up in the house, and if you haven't done anything, the police knocking at your door, you don't answer it. But when they leave, you go over to the neighbor's house to see what they wanted, because apparently she saw them go straight to the neighbor's house. Okay, she was clearly looking out the window or something. So according to her neighbor, she said that she had been in the shower when the authorities knocked on the door, which the neighbor found hard to believe, considering that she was wearing a business suit, had dry hair, and was in full daytime makeup. Okay, clearly she wasn't thinking clearly when she told that lie. So Dion then got into her car and drove away. Now, her neighbor notified the police that she had just left, and they went to her home to wait for her to come back. About 20 minutes after they arrived, she returned home and reportedly collapsed and got hysterical after allegedly learning of Lance's death. But according to the police, she shed no actual tears. That's another thing. Do you all ever notice how, while she could have him, she wanted nobody to have him? If she could have, she wanted nobody to have. Absolutely. So FBA guidance says a guilty dog will bark. Okay. So listen, do you all ever notice that when someone is, after they've done a crime, committed a crime, that they always have these crocodile tears, or they have like this fake cry where they're like shaking and their face is all balled up, right? But there's never any tears. Do you all notice that? You know why that is likely? Because it's very hard to shed real tears when you're not sorry. Think about it. It's very hard to produce real, genuine tears when you're not sorry. Okay? So, yeah, she was sitting there acting like she's crying, but there was no tears. I saw the same scenario with Susan Smith after she murdered her pitiful little children and lied and said that a black man carjacked her and drove the car into the lake or whatever. Same thing. Okay, so now in her interview with police later that afternoon, and in a subsequent videotaped interview at the Roswell PD 9 days later on August 17th, Dion denied knowing anything about Lance Herndon's death. She told authorities that she had driven her husband and daughter, who had been visiting from Jamaica, to the airport on the evening of August the 7th, and then simply returned home. She said that Herndon had briefly visited her home sometime between the hours of 9 and 10:30 p.m. Now, that was the night before Lance's body was discovered, and that she says that he brought her his IBM ThinkPad laptop computer, which he sometimes let her borrow. Herndon then left her home, she told the police. Now, despite repeated questioning, Dion stuck to her story that she never went to Lance Herndon's home the night that he was killed. She also maintained that her relationship with him was solid and that she and Lance were truly in love. But nevertheless, authorities discovered that her version of events did not match what others had been telling them. And then she obviously forgot that there was just the incident prior to his death, like a month before, where she had acted a fool when she saw him with somebody else and they had called the police. There's records of stuff like this. So clearly, her sitting there saying that their relationship was solid and they were really in love, that's just all BS. And that was all easy to figure out. Okay? So another thing is, in my opinion, people who cause scenes and they get so jealous and act foolish, those situations don't usually get better. They usually end up getting worse. They usually escalate. So that's why if you're dealing with somebody and they start acting like that, honey, trust me, it's best to just cut them off and cut your losses, okay? Because it usually gets worse. May not always, but most of the time, it just escalates. Because anyone causing a scene and constantly banging on someone's door and acting all irate because you're with somebody else when you don't have a monogamous relationship with them, clearly is a person who is in fact delusional, possessive and controlling, and someone who clearly cannot control their emotions. Okay? So finally, in January of 1998, police got the break that they were looking for. Dion was in the process of divorcing her husband, and police learned that she had spoken to her mother-in-law, Barbara Nelson, a few weeks after the murder. During the conversation, she allegedly admitted to her mother-in-law that she had indeed been to Lance Herndon's home on the night that he was killed, despite the fact that she had told police that she had not been present that night. I wonder how they know that the mother-in-law was telling the truth, though. Now, I know she killed him, but my thing is, I wonder how they believe, what made them believe the mother-in-law, because clearly the mother-in-law would have incentive to lie if this woman just divorced her husband or her son. So I'm just wondering what made them so sure that she was actually telling the truth. So anyway, she was arrested and charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, 2 counts of theft by taking, and financial transaction card fraud. And then she was convicted. Now, here's the thing. I wonder why they charged her with theft by taking. What did she in fact take? Because remember, they said his wallet and credit cards were still there. So I'm wondering, what did she take from the location for them to charge her with that? Now, according to the prosecution's theory of the case, Lance Herndon had grown tired of her and wanted to end the relationship. Authorities claimed that Herndon had told some of his friends that he was weary of her because she was controlling and her obsessive behavior. He didn't want to deal with it. He wanted to get rid of her. Absolutely. But his mistake was allowing her to come back over there and having sex with her. You see, when somebody shows and exhibits this type of behavior, the last thing you should be doing is engaging in sex with them. That's only going to make it more, volatile when you try to get rid of them. You should just cut them off and not have anything else to do with them. That's my opinion. I would not be sitting up there laying up with someone who was doing these things. Okay? That's crazy. Probably the computer. Absolutely. That could be it. Absolutely. Now, according to the state's theory, Dion came to Lance Herndon's house sometime around midnight on August the 7th or 8th. They believe the couple had sex and that she straddled a dozing or unsuspecting Herndon and beat him over the head with a large object, a large heavy object. Prosecutors say that Herndon kept a large crescent wrench in his house, but it was never found after the killing. So after she killed Lance Herndon, prosecutors say that she then took a shower to wash off the victim's blood, then helped herself to some of his jewelry and one of his credit cards. Oh, so that's what she stole. Now, they say she then unplugged his alarm clocks so that they would not still be going off and attracting attention from his employees when Herndon's employees began to arrive at work around 7 a.m. Only someone familiar with Herndon's sleeping and working habits, like Dion, according to prosecutors, would have known to unplug the clocks. Several of his intimates said Herndon normally slept on his back with his arms folded across his chest. That's creepy. Who sleeps like that? On your back with your arms folded across your chest? Okay, sounds strange to me. Anyway, yeah, so they say he normally slept on his back with his arms folded across his chest. And that's exactly the way his dead body was discovered. But the medical examiner claims that it's possible, or that it's impossible, that Herndon would have been in that position after such a brutal attack. Therefore, authorities theorize someone familiar with his sleeping patterns would have had to have placed him in that position so that it would appear as if Herndon was murdered while he slept. Prosecutors also say that before she left the house, Dion went downstairs to the Access Incorporated offices. So his offices were in his home. Okay, the offices were in the home. That's why she turned off those alarm clocks. So she went downstairs and she helped herself to Lance's IBM ThinkPad. So yeah, you were right when you said that she likely took the computer. Okay, now although he had sometimes loaned her the laptop in the past, his co-workers claimed the meticulous Herndon never allowed the IBM to leave his office without its protective case. Yet the case was later discovered in a storage closet in the office. Dion freely admitted to police that she had the computer, claiming that Lance had brought it with him to her home the night of August the 7th. She also claimed that Herndon often loaned it to her without its case. Neither Lance Herndon's jewelry nor the murder weapon were ever recovered. Police theorized that Dion disposed of the crescent wrench and possibly the jewelry as well when she left her house on August the 8th after learning that the authorities wanted to speak to her. But the credit card that the prosecutors claimed she stole from Lance did surface again. The defendant used it the morning of August the 8th before Herndon's body had been discovered to order by phone a display cabinet for her home that cost nearly $3,000. So she didn't kill this man now balling out of control? Oh, okay. Prosecutors also point to forensic evidence that says, that proves that she committed the heinous murder. Head and pubic hair samples, and we already know about that, was clearly found on his body. And so that is how, they were able to prove that she did all these heinous things. So she probably was great in bed for him to deal with her crazy self. Likely so, right? Well, that was to his detriment, unfortunately. So with that all being said, that's the story of millionaire businessman Lance Herndon and the woman that he was dealing with, Dion Bow. Okay? So I hope y'all enjoyed that story. I'm going to be going live again right after this on the same channel. And this story is going to be about someone that I knew. Sheriff-elect Derwin Brown, who was murdered December the 15th in 2000. So that all being said, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Once again, please like and share the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I hope to see you all right black in the chats. And until next time, Royals, I will talk to you all again soon. Peace.